DevilNeverCry.
Welcome to the next installment in a series of guides for Final Fantasy XVI. In today's video, we'll be covering the icon Ramuh, how all of their abilities work, and why I think they have some of the best skills available throughout the entire game. If you're interested in more guides or content for Final Fantasy XVI, then definitely subscribe, as there's more on the way. If you're looking for more guides to get you up to speed on Final Fantasy XVI, then definitely check out some of my previous content. With that out of the way, let's dive right in. Ramuh is an icon that you get access to somewhat early in the game and has a plethora of skills that tend to focus more on building stagger and collaboratively hitting multiple enemies as opposed to just straight up raw damage. Initially, when compared to other icons such as Phoenix or Garuda, Ramuh might not seem all too powerful, but when paired with the right tools and in the right hands, it can be absolutely devastating. I did mention that Ramuh has one of the best skills throughout the entirety of Final Fantasy XVI, and that's something that I'll be touching upon later. Up first though is its iconic feat, Blind Justice. Whenever Blind Justice is enabled by pressing the circle button, Clive will go into a targeting mode. Time will ever so slightly slow down as a giant reticle appears on the screen. When hovering this reticle over enemies, they will begin to be targeted. Those of you who have played Kingdom Hearts games will recognize the similarities to the shotlock system. Whenever you're happy with the number of enemies targeted, you're able to exact Blind Justice by pressing the button again, where Clive will then exit the targeting mode and throw out balls of lightning that affix themselves to the enemies, with the amount of lightning being thrown out directly correlating to the amount of enemies that were initially targeted. When the skill is fully upgraded, you'll be able to throw out up to 9 pieces of lightning. When an enemy has a piece of lightning affixed to them and Clive strikes them with an attack, it'll deal extra damage as the ball begins to discharge, with the amount of damage that it does directly correlating with the attack that set it off. The game even suggests that you use a melee attack to discharge the lightning as opposed to magic, as it'll do more damage that way. And once one piece of lightning has discharged via an attack, all of them will begin to discharge, no matter if the lightning is on just one enemy or on multiple. As an addendum, it's also worth noting that Blind Justice can also juggle airborne enemies when they discharge, so keep that in mind whenever you're trying to set up some fancy combos. All things considered, when compared to other iconic feats, Blind Justice is simply okay. It slows down the pace of battle quite rapidly thanks to its targeting system, doesn't necessarily do all too much physical damage, and isn't really as useful as other iconic feats like Phoenix's Phoenix Shift or Garuda's Deadly Embrace. It also leaves you quite vulnerable during the entirety of its targeting phase, where you can't really move all too much, and if an enemy's attack hits you, it'll cancel out of your Blind Justice regardless of how much you've targeted. With Blind Justice all done and dusted, let's start talking about Ramuh's iconic abilities. The first of which being Lightning Rod, what I believe to be the best ability in this entire game. If you've seen some of my other iconic guides or just overall tips and tricks videos for Final Fantasy XVI, you'll know why, as I constantly make reference to this one skill. When Lightning Rod is used, Clive throws out a stationary ball of lightning that floats ominously on the battlefield. Whenever this ball of lightning is struck, it will deal out an area of effect attack that deals a moderate amount of physical damage, but deals a significant amount of stagger damage. Something that's important to note is that the area of effect attack that occurs when the ball is struck will actually do more damage whenever an enemy attacks it as opposed to Clive. And so if you bait or goad a mini-boss into attacking you in the direction of this lightning rod and they strike it, they will suffer a large amount of stagger damage to the point where this ability just feels broken. What's more, even though Lightning Rod is a static ability, you're actually able to reposition it by simply pressing the button again, where the lightning rod will reposition itself to wherever you're currently locked onto. Enemies and bosses like to constantly move around the battlefield, and so it's always worth repositioning this skill to get the most use out of it, particularly if you feel that a big attack from a boss is coming your way. As I've also mentioned in previous videos, Lightning Rod works quite well with multi-hitting attacks, and so if you really want to melt an enemy's stagger bar, all you have to do is pair Lightning Rod with a skill such as Bahamut's Mega Flare, Garuda's Gouge, or even Odin's Gungnir. Ramuh's Lightning Rod is a skill that saw me complete New Game and New Game Plus. It's a mainstay in my loadout because it's just that good. Pressing ahead, we come to Ramuh's Pile Drive. an ability in which Clive drives Ramuh's stake deep into the ground before unleashing a torment of lightning in a big area of effect attack that knocks enemies back. This move is quite useful for several reasons. The first of which, as mentioned, if you use it in the midst of a group of enemies, you'll blow them all away, allowing you to get some breathing room in the battlefield. The second of which is that it does an immense amount of stagger damage, particularly against bosses and mini-bosses, so for that reason it's definitely not an ability to sleep on. What's more though, if you decide to use this move as mentioned in the midst of a group of enemies, you'll actually gain a significant amount of limit break from simply using this move. It's also worth mentioning as an additional effect that any enemy that has been flung back and is on the ground thanks to pile drive will actually suffer an extended additional recovery time thanks to the stunning effect of the move. This essentially means that the enemy will be lying on the ground defenseless for longer, allowing you to set up moves that perhaps have a longer startup animation, such as Ramuh's Blind Justice or something like Odin's Dancing Steel. Moving on, we come to Ramuh's Thunderstorm, an ability in which enacted, Clive will simply spin Ramuh's staff far above his head before bringing down a torrent of lightning bolts upon a single target. Similar to the previous skill, Pile Drive, any enemy that is hit with Ramuh's Thunderstorm will suffer an increased recovery time. Enemies that are hit with the skill will collapse to the floor and lie there for an extended time completely defenseless, allowing you to plan your next move. Something cool about Thunderstorm, however, is that initial animation that plays out where Clive twirls the staff before calling down the lightning can actually be used to juggle enemies. It does take a little bit of setup with the enemies having to be airborne first and foremost, but it is pretty cool to pull off in the heat of battle. It's also worth mentioning that you can move around initially when casting Thunderstorm, which can help with getting the spacing right for the juggle. That then brings us on to Ramuh's ultimate skill, Judgment Bolt, in which Clive calls down a gigantic Levin bolt from the very heavens that absolutely decimates enemies. This attack does far more physical damage than it does stagger damage, so it should be used with that knowledge in mind. Though you can technically hit multiple enemies as collateral thanks to just how big this move is, the main portion of damage will only occur to the main target that is being locked onto. And by upgrading this skill, Clive will throw out 2 giant bolts of Levin as opposed to just 1. As with all of the ultimate skills, whenever Judgment Bolt is enacted, time will slow to an absolute crawl, and Clive is invincible throughout the entirety of the animation, which means that you can technically iframe through an attack if you use Judgment Bolt with the right timing. And with that, we've pretty much covered the entirety of Ramuh's toolset. If you found this video helpful or you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe as there's more to come. If you feel as though there's something I've missed, or you have your own top tips, let me know down in the comments below. And with all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.